Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a law today that's all about influence. Robert Greene's Law 9 from the 48 Laws of Power. Win through your actions, never through argument. Ever notice how some people just command attention without ever raising their voice?
That's fascinating, isn't it? Law 9 really flips the script on persuasion. I mean, we often get so caught up in winning those debates, proving we're right, but this law suggests real power is in letting actions speak for themselves.
Makes you think, huh? So let's dig into this. What makes arguing so dangerous, especially if you're trying to influence or persuade?
Well, arguments, they just trigger defensiveness. Even if you've got the most logical point, people dig in their heels, resisting, because they don't want to feel defeated. And that creates resentment, and it just really blocks your influence in the long run.
It's like pushing a rope uphill, right? The harder you push, the more it resists.
Exactly. And that's where it comes in. When you act decisively, skillfully, you bypass all that intellectual resistance. You make a much more powerful impression. Action, it's tangible proof. It shows your competence in a way words just can't.
I like that. So let's get a visual here. Michelangelo, the artist behind David.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When Michelangelo was commissioned to create David, he faced a ton of criticism. Other artists debated his methods, his techniques. Imagine that pressure, every move scrutinized by your rivals.
I can only imagine. So how did he deal with it? Did he join those artistic debates?
He didn't waste time on arguments. He let his masterpiece do the talking. The result? David silenced all the critics. It became a testament to his genius and solidified his legacy. Centuries later, we're still talking about it.
That's powerful. Instead of getting bogged down defending his ideas, he poured his energy into creating something tangible, undeniable.
Exactly. That's a key takeaway here. When you're facing critics or naysayers, remember Michelangelo. Instead of exhausting yourself arguing, focus on those results. Let them speak for themselves. It's way more effective in winning people over.
We've seen it in art. Now, let's shift gears, look at a different arena. The battlefield. Napoleon Bonaparte comes to mind, master strategist. He didn't seem like someone who enjoyed long debates.
Not at all. Napoleon was all about action. Back in 1799, France was in political turmoil, and he saw an opening. Instead of getting tangled up in those political debates, he went for it, staged a coup, seized power, and established himself as first consul.
Talk about decisive action. He made all those arguments irrelevant by acting quickly, decisively.
Exactly. Napoleon understood in the world of power, timing is everything. By the time his opponents could even think of a response, he was already in control.
I'm seeing a pattern here. Michelangelo silencing his critics with David, Napoleon grabbing power with a strategic coup. Action beats argument every time.
You got it. And it's not just for these big historical figures, it's for everyday life, too. Imagine you're at work and someone's always criticizing your ideas. Instead of endless back and forth, Law 9 says, implement one of your ideas on a small scale. Let those results do the talking.
It's like a pilot project, right?
Right.
Prove of the concept, the success speaks for itself, and the naysayers, they've got nothing left to stand on.
Exactly. Shifting the focus from words to tangible outcomes. Which leads to a fascinating question. Why do actions resonate so much deeper when words just fail to persuade?
That's a good question. It seems like there's something deeper going on here, something beyond actions speak louder than words.
It all comes down to psychology. When you argue, you're appealing to logic, reasoning. But actions, they bypass all that. They speak directly to the subconscious, making a much more lasting impression. It's almost like rewiring beliefs through experience, not just logic.
So even small, deliberate actions can have a huge impact on how people see us and our ideas.
Absolutely. Think about it. A well-timed act of generosity, a show of competence under pressure, or even just consistently living your values. Those actions tell a story that's far more compelling than any argument.
Makes perfect sense, but doesn't Law 9 then mean we should just always avoid arguments, even if we have valuable points to make?
That's where the nuance comes in. It's not about becoming some silent robot, never engaging in discussion. It's about knowing when arguing is pointless, choosing a more effective path.
So being strategic with our energy, knowing when to step back from those pointless arguments and when to channel that energy into something more impactful.
Exactly. And sometimes the most powerful action you can take is silence.
Silence is action. That's interesting. Tell me more.
Silence, used strategically, it can be incredibly powerful. It lets you observe, gather information, plan your moves, and it can project this aura of confidence and self-control. It can really throw your opponents off balance.
That's like the calm before the storm, right? You're not just reacting, you're strategizing, waiting for the perfect moment.
Exactly. Choosing your battles wisely, focusing your energy where it'll have the most impact.
I can see this being easy to fall into the ego trap with this law. It's tempting to want to win every argument, even when it's counterproductive.
Oh, for sure. The ego loves to be right. But remember, the goal isn't to be right, it's to be effective. Power is about getting things done, not stroking your ego.
So how do we avoid that trap? How do we detach from that need to always be right and focus on the goal?
Self-awareness is key. Recognizing when you're getting pulled into those ego-driven debates and consciously choosing to step back. Ask yourself, is this argument really moving me forward, or am I just trying to prove a point?
Sounds like it takes practice, mastering this, training ourselves to step back and let go of that need to win every argument.
It does take practice, but the rewards are worth it. When you master Law 9, you become more effective in reaching your goals, but you also find a kind of inner peace and strength that comes from not having to constantly defend yourself.
Powerful thought. It's like you're breaking free from the ego's grip and tapping into this deeper well of confidence. Before we move on, though, I want to bring up another figure who understood Law 9, Abraham Lincoln. He had immense opposition during the Civil War, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And the Emancipation Proclamation, that was a bold move. It really shaped his legacy in a way no debate ever could.
It's a great example. Lincoln, with all that pressure and criticism, he knew decisive action was needed. And the Emancipation Proclamation, yeah, it sparked a debate, but it was a turning point in the war. It solidified his place in history.
Highlights the power of action, especially in times of crisis. Sometimes those bold moves are needed to break through and create lasting change.
Exactly. And it's a reminder, sometimes the most impactful actions, they're the ones that challenge the way things are, that push us out of our comfort zones.
So we've seen Law 9 in art, politics, even war. But I'm curious, how does it apply to the modern world? To our everyday challenges and opportunities?
Great transition. Let's bring Law 9 into the 21st century and see how it works in our world today.
Love it. Because at the end of the day, we want this deep dive to be more than just some intellectual exercise. We want to help you, the listener, apply these insights to your own life, to your pursuit of power and influence.
Absolutely. Let's get practical, explore how you can use Law 9 to reach your goals, whether it's in your career, relationships, or personal life.
Sounds good to me. Let's help our listeners become masters of action, not argument.
Let's do it. Perfect. I think a great place to start is with a modern-day example. Jeff Bezos and the rise of Amazon. Remember back when everybody thought online bookstores, they'd just never work? Well, Bezos proved them wrong, didn't he?
It really is hard to picture a world without Amazon now. You're right, though. Back then, people were skeptical. So how did Bezos handle that? Did he try and, argue his case, convince everybody?
Nah, not really. Instead of getting bogged down trying to defend his vision, Bezos, he just focused on building a solid business, relentlessly innovating, prioritizing the customer. In other words, he let his actions speak.
And boy, did they speak. Amazon, it just blew up, became this global thing. He basically silenced those critics through sheer success. It's like a perfect example of how focusing on tangible outcomes, it's way more persuasive than arguing forever.
You got it. Bezos' success, it really underscores how important it is to focus on what you can control. Your actions, strategies, your commitment to excellence. Trying to win everyone over with arguments, it's usually just a waste of energy.
So we've seen actions are powerful, but is there ever a time when it's not going to gent right to get into an argument? Or should we always just follow Law 9, let actions speak for themselves?
That's a great question, and it gets at the nuance of Law 9, right? It's about strategic action, not just blindly following a rule. Sometimes speaking up, it's not just necessary, it's vital.
Give me an example. When might we need to, step outside this actions over arguments approach?
Think about situations where, injustice is happening or someone's being treated unfairly. Staying silent then, it can look like you're going along with it. Sometimes you need to use your voice, to raise awareness, push for change, stand up for what you believe in.
Right, I get it. So Law 9 isn't about being totally passive. It's more about picking your battles carefully.
Yeah,
Understanding the best way to actually make a difference.
exactly. It's about knowing when words are needed to get things moving and when actions themselves will make the biggest statement. Let's say you're really passionate about a cause. You could protest, you could volunteer. That's a powerful way to show your commitment. But speaking up, raising awareness, educating others, that could be a crucial first step.
So it's not ditching arguments completely, it's using them strategically.
Yeah.
Like a way to kickstart action, right?
Right on. Think of it as a dance. Sometimes you lead with words, sometimes with actions. The trick is finding the right rhythm, the right balance for each situation.
Okay, starting to see how it all fits together, but let's make this really practical, for the folks listening. How can they apply Law 9 to their own lives? What are some concrete steps to becoming masters of action, not argument?
First thing, I'd say pay attention to those situations where you get pulled into arguments. Is it at work? In your relationships? Figure out those patterns, then you can start choosing a different response.
Like know your triggers.
Yeah.
What sets you off, and how can you break that cycle before you get sucked into a pointless fight?
Exactly. Once you know your triggers, you can try different things. Instead of going back and forth, ask yourself, what could I do to actually solve this problem or get what I want?
So, shifting from reaction to action. Instead of getting defensive or trying to prove you're right, you focus on what you can do to move forward positively. Any other strategies we can use?
Don't be afraid to show, not just tell. Got a brilliant idea? Don't spend hours pitching it in a meeting. Maybe try a small pilot project. Let those results do the talking.
Oh, right, like that pilot project idea we were talking about. Hard to argue with hard evidence.
You said it. And remember, the best actions are often the simplest. It doesn't have to be some big, grand gesture. A little kindness, willingness to go the extra mile, consistently doing good work, all these things speak volumes about you.
Great tips. Anything else our listeners should remember?
Yeah, remember the power of silence. Sometimes just refusing to get into a pointless argument, that's the strongest move you can make. It projects confidence, self-control, and can really disarm people.
So silence isn't just nothing, it can be a tactic. It's about knowing when to hold back, when to make your move.
Exactly. And when you do speak up, make sure your words match your actions. Inconsistency just kills your credibility.
Walk the talk, right?
Yeah.
Don't just talk about your values, live them. Don't just promise results, deliver them.
That's the key. And remember, this Law 9 thing, it's a journey, not a destination. You'll mess up, make mistakes, but just keep practicing, keep refining how you do things.
Just like learning anything new, right? It takes time, patience, and you got to be willing to learn from those slip-ups.
For sure. As you get better at using Law 9, you'll find yourself handling those tricky situations with more, grace, confidence, and effectiveness. But there's one more thing that can really sabotage us if we're not careful.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this. The ego trap. We talked about it a bit, but it's worth another look, I think.
You got it. It's so easy to get caught up in needing to be right, win every argument, feel superior. But that need for validation, it can lead us down a bad path, especially when it comes to power.
Because if we're too focused on our ego, we lose sight of what really matters. Our goals, building real relationships, making a positive impact.
Exactly. The ego, it can blind us to opportunities, make us self-sabotage, and ultimately lead to our downfall. So the question is, how do we avoid that trap? How do we let go of needing to be right all the time?
That is the million-dollar question. How do we keep our egos in check, especially when the pressure's on?
It starts with self-awareness. We got to honestly look at why we're doing what we're doing. Are we speaking up because we truly believe in something? Or are we just trying to win, stroke our ego, look smarter than everyone else?
It's about pausing and asking, why am I really doing this?
Right. And if we see our egos calling the shots, got to be willing to, step aside and let someone else take over.
That takes humility, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Admitting we're not always right, that we can learn from others, that it's okay to let go of the reins sometimes.
Humility, it's a powerful tool, especially when it comes to power. It disarms people, makes us more approachable, helps us build stronger connections. Like they say, you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. When we come in with humility, we create a much more positive, collaborative vibe.
Love that. And in that kind of environment, we're way more likely to hit those goals and build real influence. I got to be honest, though. Letting go of that need to be right, it's hard, especially when we feel strongly about something. Any tips on how to cultivate that humility?
One thing that can help is actively looking for different viewpoints. Instead of surrounding yourself with yes people, talk to people who challenge you. It can be uncomfortable, but it's a great way to grow, to learn.
Stepping outside our echo chambers.
Right.
Exposing ourselves to fresh ideas, new ways of thinking.
Exactly. And it helps us develop a more nuanced perspective, which makes us better at navigating those complex situations.
I'm glad we're diving into this aspect of Law 9. It's a good reminder that this isn't just about success out there in the world, it's about inner growth, too.
You got it. It's about that inner peace and strength that comes from knowing who you are, what you believe in, without needing constant validation from others. But hold on, before we jump ahead, there's this fascinating historical example that really shows Law 9 in action.
Oh, I love these history lessons. Who are we talking about?
Let's go back to ancient Greece. Meet Diogenes, the cynic philosopher. Now this guy, he was known for being radically simple, rejecting all those societal norms, lived in a barrel, owned nothing but a cloak and a staff, and spent his days, challenging conventional wisdom.
Wait, he lived in a barrel. That's definitely a statement. Makes sense why you picked him as a Law 9 example.
Exactly. Diogenes, he understood the power of symbolic action. He didn't waste his breath arguing with people about life's meaning or how to live. He just lived his truth, and his actions, they spoke for themselves.
It's like he was saying, this is me, take it or leave it.
Right, and people were drawn to that. His way of life, it attracted followers who liked his authenticity, his willingness to challenge the norm.
So even back then, action spoke louder than words. It's a timeless thing, across cultures, across time.
Totally. And since we're on the subject of timeless figures, let's zoom forward a few centuries. The Renaissance. Leonardo da Vinci, the ultimate Renaissance man.
Oh yeah. The painter, the sculptor, inventor, scientist, he was like a master of everything.
And a master of Law 9. Leonardo didn't just talk about his ideas, he brought them to life. Through his art, his inventions, his scientific explorations, his notebooks, they're full of sketches and plans for everything from flying machines to anatomy studies.
It's like he was saying, don't just take my word for it, look at what I can do.
Exactly. He was constantly experimenting, pushing the limits of what we knew, showing his genius through what he created. And his work, it's still inspiring artists, scientists, thinkers, everyone, really. But let's bring this back down to earth for a second. How does Law 9 work in more everyday situations? Like, say you're trying to get a raise at work. Would you use Law 9 there?
That's a good one. Asking for a raise, it can be tricky. It's tempting to go in there with a bulletproof argument for why you deserve more money. But would that really be the best way, given what we know about Law 9?
That's where that nuance comes in again. It's not about avoiding the conversation altogether. It's about strategically using your actions to make your case stronger.
So instead of just talking about why you deserve more, maybe focus on showing your value through your work.
Exactly. Think about it. Have you taken on more responsibility lately? Exceeded expectations, gone above and beyond to help the team? Let your performance do the talking.
So it's like building your case through actions. You create this undeniable track record of success.
Right on. And you can use Law 9 to connect with your boss too. Instead of listing all your achievements, ask for feedback, ask for advice. It shows you're eager to learn and grow, which makes you a more valuable asset to the company.
So it's about using your actions to build trust, build credibility, making that conversation about money much smoother.
You got it. When you've shown your worth and built that relationship with your boss, talking about money, it becomes way easier. They'll already know what you bring to the table.
I like that. It's like you're subtly steering things in your favor through what you DO instead of forcing it through a head-on argument that could get tense.
Exactly. That's the beauty of Law 9. Working smarter, not harder. Getting what you want with grace, strategy, impact.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation about Law 9. We've covered so much. The downsides of arguments, the whole psychology of action, the power of silence, the need for humility, and even how to use this in everyday situations like asking for a raise.
And we've taken a trip through history, looking at figures like Michelangelo, Napoleon, Diogenes, Leonardo da Vinci, all of them understanding the power of letting actions speak for themselves.
It's amazing how this principle pops up across different times and places. It really shows how universal Law 9 is. Before we wrap things up, I want to make sure we address one last question that might be on our listeners' mind.
Okay, I'm listening. What do you think we should cover?
Well, we've talked a lot about when not to argue. But what about those times when speaking up is just absolutely necessary? When staying silent will be wrong for ourselves or others?
That's important, and it brings us back to that idea of nuance and discernment. Law 9 isn't some rigid rule. It's a principle to be applied with intelligence and compassion.
So how do we know when it's time to speak up, even if it might lead to an argument?
There are times when silence equals complicity. When speaking up isn't just our right, it's our responsibility. You see, injustice, discrimination, abuse, silence only makes things worse. Your voice, it can be a powerful tool for change in those situations.
But even then, wouldn't Law 9 say actions are still more effective than words?
For sure. But sometimes, words, they're the thing that gets the ball rolling. You might need words to raise awareness, rally people, inspire them to take action. Think of it this way. Words can be the spark that ignites the fire of action.
So it's not choosing one or the other, it's knowing how words and actions work together and when each is most effective.
Exactly. It's like that dance, right? Sometimes you lead with words, other times with actions. It's finding the right rhythm, the right balance for each situation.
This has been such a great discussion. I feel like we've really broken down Law 9, and I hope everyone listening feels like they can use this stuff in their own life.
I'm glad to hear that. It's been a pleasure going deep on this with you.
Likewise, I always learn something new from our chats,
Yeah.
and I hope our listeners do too.
Definitely. We've talked about so much, from how action works on our minds to the importance of being humble and strategically silent.
We've got over some cool historical examples and practical tips for using Law 9 in everyday life.
And really, it all boils down to this. Let your success be your argument.
I like that. Actions speak louder than words. Until next time, remember to win through what you do, not through arguing.
And remember, mastering Law 9, it's a process. It's about refining your approach, trying different things, always pushing to be more effective in your actions.
Very well said. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep taking action.
Yeah, it's easy to overthink things, get stuck, but just doing something, even if it's not perfect, that's often the best way to get past fear and doubt.
I agree. It's like that saying, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step.
So true. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into Law 9.
It's been great exploring this with you. Always enjoy these conversations.
Me too. Always come away with something new to think about. Hope our listeners do too. Oh, I'm sure they do. We've covered a lot of ground. How action works on us psychologically, the importance of humility, choosing when to stay silent.
We look at fascinating people from history and got practical tips for using Law 9 every day.
And at the end of the day, it's about this. Let your success be the proof.
Love that. Actions over words, right? So until next time, remember to win through your actions, not through arguments.
And keep in mind that Law 9, it's something you work on, It's about getting better at it, trying new things, always aiming to be more effective with your actions.
Well said. So until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep taking action.